Contrary to popular belief, the most important part of the interview is preparing for it. I want you all to think back to your first big interview. Think back to the one that made you excited, to the one where you waited anxiously for them to call. What was it like walking up to the interview, shaking their hands, feeling the spotlight beaming on you as they asked, "Tell me about yourself"? Were there butterflies? Did you stumble on some words? Maybe you completely nailed it or tanked it. You're not alone. You see, 4 years, fresh out of undergrad, I was preparing for my first big interview. This was one I had come to idolize after watching and learning from my college mentors before me. I researched the office where the job was, I put on my power outfit, and I rehearsed many times exactly how I would tell them about myself. And on the day of the interview, it was perfect. I left beaming. I saw the heads nodding, the pen scratching across the interview forms. I left my thank you notes at the door, and a day later, I got the offer. Unfortunately, a few weeks in, I found myself in a place where I was completely burning out. I was in a job where I was micromanaged, overwhelmed, and couldn't build a boundary between work and home. I began to dread coming in the mornings, and after 10 months, I left. I took a couple steps back to ask, how did I end up here? The parts of my job that I loved, where I was using my strengths, only accounted for a small part of what I was responsible for. And for the rest, I was faced with a lot of challenge, with little guidance and support, and that caused me a lot of anxiety in a place where I thought I'd be great. But then I remembered my interview. They asked, "How do you handle criticism?" Of course, I told them I'm great at it. I want them to hire me. And they asked, "How do you like planning and logistics?" And I told them that I'm good at that, but honestly, I hate that stuff. Can you blame me, though? I was flattered enough to even receive the interview. So of course I ended up telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. This excitement of this first job and this first offer just blindly drew me in. It was then that I realized the idea of this job was more important to me than advocating for what I needed to be happy. Now, the past few years as a career advisor, I've coached hundreds of students on how not to make the same mistake that I did. So today, I invite you all to learn 3 strategies that I use to teach my students so they can feel powerful in knowing exactly what they need and knowing how to ask for it. These 3 strategies are knowing your non-negotiables, identifying your strengths, and being able to find alignment through research. How do you even start to find your non-negotiables? By tuning into the activities and the surroundings that bring you joy. Do you absolutely need a job where you're collaborating with others, or do you work better on your own? Do you absolutely need the hustle and bustle of a city and a Target readily available at the end of your day? Or do you prefer the peace and quiet of a rural setting? Tune into what is necessary for your well-being within and outside of your job. For example, this job that I accepted brought this pizza-loving Brooklyn girl down to a small college town in North Carolina. I was a fish out of water. As soon as I got there, traveled an hour in every direction to just try and find a good slice of pizza. And at best, I got an okay crust and some lousy sauce. So believe me when I say, it took a long time for me to adjust, not just to that, but the slower pace of life and the lack of public transportation. This made me realize more than ever, my priorities need to include what makes me happy outside of work too. Your non-negotiable list should be the things that wake you up and bring you to work in the morning, and should be the things that you look forward to when you leave at the end of the day. Some of you may have done this process already. Continue to dig deep and think about what are your own priorities. This is how we connect your motivation to meaningful experience. We need to learn how to listen to what motivates us, and we have to ask for that. The next step here is then to identify your strengths. Knowing what you're good at is the foundation to ask for what you need in those non-negotiables. How do you find your strengths? Think about the compliments that you have received that have stuck with you. Think about how your best friend would describe you to someone who's never met you before. Hidden in these answers are the authentic strengths that you get to use in your career because you're naturally good at them. When I was a student, I was once told, "Ashley, you always have a story to tell." In that compliment, I found strength in my communication, and this motivated me to find a career where I can educate and empower others. It's important to take note. You may have some idealized strengths along with your actual strengths. That happened to be a large challenge of what I faced in my unpleasant job several years ago. I used every opportunity I could to uncover my strengths with experience. Every volunteer opportunity, every side project, every new responsibility, I took the time to assess what I was loving and what were the elements that were missing. In that process, I was empowered to make my own happiness. And I learned how to ask for help, which as a native New Yorker, I can still be too prideful to do. As I learned each new strength about myself, I made sure to include that in my non-negotiable list too. Now that you've taken an internal audit of your non-negotiables and your strengths, we're already at the final step, which is finding alignment through research. Alignment is all about matching your internal needs to the opportunities around you. You can find alignment starting with research. So you can gather information online about the jobs that you want to pursue in the future. You can talk to current professionals that are doing exactly what you want to be doing. You can network and even test out some new responsibilities you may want to add on your own resume. Once you get a sense of what's out there in the world and what you have, you must draw a comparison. Draw the dotted lines between your own non-negotiable list and that job posting in front of you. If you notice that something is missing, you have two options ahead of you. One, prepare to advocate in that interview. Make sure the people across from you know how important that element is to your own success. Or two, take a step back and realize this may not be the job for you. And that's okay. Don't settle for anything less than what you need to be happy. I got to put my own advice to the test 2 years ago when I interviewed for my current role as a career advisor. In this interview, I advocated for a space where I can be independent, creative, and have a culture of coworkers who could be my family too. These, by the way, are all at the top of my non-negotiable list. And in that interview, when they asked me, "How do you handle criticism?" I answered honestly. And I was proud of myself for being self-aware in the answers I gave them. And then when they asked me, "How do you like logistics and planning?" I acknowledged my skill, but then I redirected them to my strengths, always pointing them back to the way that I bring value. And so when they called me with that job offer, I'll never forget how they said it. They said, "Ashley, we already see you as part of our career family. We'd like to offer you the job." The fact that they used the same words from my own non-negotiables back to me when making that offer showed me I had found a place that would value those non-negotiables, would utilize my strengths, and that we had found great alignment through what they needed and what I was offering. So now, as you all prepare for your next big interview, I want you all to remember The most important part happens before you arrive and with yourself. Take the time to align your strengths and your non-negotiables to all the big dreams ahead of you. Be confident and proud of all that you have learned about yourself. And with that, you'll master the art of the interview. Thank you. Thank you.